Hi folks, John here. Welcome to my channel. First of all, you'll see that I'm talking in the background, but the audio wasn't very good, so I'm doing an over speak on it. Tonight we're going to tie a shrimp pattern. This pattern's quite accurate to the shrimp that you're going to see in the water sometimes. We're starting off here with a O'Shaughnessy or slightly longer shanked hook in the vise. Mustad or Gamakatsu, any of those brands are more than suitable. First of all, for beginners, I'm showing that I've got a rotating vise. So as I spin the vise around, the hook shank stays parallel. If you don't have one of those vices, you would have to at some point turn the hook upside down. I learnt on one of those vices, but I suppose 20 years ago or so, changed over to a rotating vise, and I find it much easier to use. So just a word on the materials. We're going to use a nylon thread, and as you're learning, it's good to use a good strong thread. It saves on breakages, and it actually goes around the material correctly. I'm just showing you a comparison there between a different saltwater hook, and you'll see that it's actually probably too short for a shrimp anyway. So this is the silk I'm using. It's a Flymaster Plus, and it's a flat waxed nylon. This is a 210 denier, which is nearly, I suppose, the biggest or largest diameter you can get in a flat waxed, and I use it for all my larger patterns. So to introduce the silk, I put it behind the hook, and I leave myself a couple of millimeters between where I start the fly really and the eye of the hook, and that just gives you a little bit of breathing space as a new tire. When you come to form the head, you've got a little bit more room to finish things off. So you basically just over wrap the silk. You'll see some people trim this waist piece off. I don't. Even though I've been tying a long time, I use that as a guide to form this continuous coating of thread. You'll hear some of the guys, teachers and whatnot, calling this a thread base, and it's exactly what it is. It's a foundation. So this foundation needs to be gripped onto the hook as tightly as you can. So you'll even see my vise wobbling a bit. And then at the very back you can trim off your waist. So we've got a good solid thread base or a foundation to tie the fly onto. I then bring the silk back up to, I suppose, 3/4 of the way up. Don't crowd the eye. It's better to be a little bit further back than forward. Now, saltwater flies are typically fished upside down, so that's the way they would ride in the water. And to make that happen, we have to use some extra weight. The natural weight of the hook would make the fly sit that way as shown. So you'll see there I'm showing you a completed fly, and that's done with bead chain eyes. Bead chain eyes are good for skinny water, or we don't need too much of a splash. But for deeper water, it's good to use a dumbbell eye. So I recommend taking the same pattern with a couple of different options in weight. That just means you can fish different depths of water. It's important to get the fly down on the bottom as quickly as possible without spooking the fish, so you need different weight options. So for this fly, I'm going to use a medium-sized dumbbell eye. The little eyes on the sides aren't really that important, but if that's what you have, put them in. I don't think it does any harm. Maybe a little bit of extra attraction if the fish was to come at your fly from sideways. So tie your eyes on with cross wraps going between the eyes, and you really want to, as a beginner, probably break your silk a few times, because that's the sort of force that you should be putting on it. So a few different cross wraps, and then you can go around the base, and I don't know what you would call these. I call them helicopter wraps, but they basically lock in the previous turns that you've had over. Check that your eyes are very secure. You want them as tight as they can be. Typically, this is where some of your first saltwater flies will begin to disintegrate. So I'm checking that they're on square and parallel, just to help the fly ride correctly in the water. I always put a little bit of super glue on them for extra security. I'm using Zap-A-Gap here with a brush. I find that I get more flies out of that type of bottle rather than one with a little tube on the end, and providing you don't knock it over, it lasts quite a while. Just to point out, you'll learn this from experience, don't tighten the lid on your super glue very tight, otherwise come your next evening of fly tying, you won't be able to get it open. So at this stage you could half hitch the fly and set it to one side to dry, minimizing the risk of gluing your fingers together, but this is quite a large hook, so I'm going to keep going. This fly is typically going away from the bonefish that's chasing it. So we're going to try and represent the mouth parts and the feelers of that shrimp. So the first material going in here is, you can just about see them there, and you do want these to be lightly, sparsely dressed. You can see little red mouth parts there. So we're going to tie those in now. So the first material coming up is a excuse me, is a synthetic dubbing, and this is an orangey type red material. Again, we don't need much, and we're going to tie this in the gape of the hook. So I'm tying it in loosely on my side, and then as the silk comes round over the top, I'm not doing any sort of pinch and loop. So as I tighten it, it's going to pull into the center of the gape. You'll notice that there's fibers pointing forwards towards the eye. So I've actually tied in half the amount I want, because I'm then going to brush those back and put a turn in on top of them. You'll notice there that my thread is actually split a little bit. That happens with these flat nylon threads. If that happens, you'll see me probably throughout this video spinning the bobbin, and that just keeps that tight. The feelers in this fly are actually going to be marabou, but sometimes they break off, so I'm tying in here a little bit of, this can be any material, partridge, woodcock, pheasant, hen pheasant rather, any material, just to give the appearance of the legs of the shrimp. And again, I'm putting these in pretty long, because this is more of a backup in case the marabou fibers, that's me spinning the bobbin there to tighten that split up in the silk. So we're tying in these as a backup to the marabou in case it breaks, and then we still have a usable fly. I think we've all been in the position where the best fly in your box is the one that's fallen to bits, but this just is a little bit of extra detail. So those are in, and now we're going to put a few fibers of the ostrich on top of that. You could use marabou, but my friend Nick has reliably informed me that marabou can break even easier, and I've such avoided it. If you don't have ostrich, you could use mongoose or any of those sort of fibrous materials to give movement. And we're just going to tie those in lightly on the top of the hook, and then keeping the tail's the wrong description, the legs of the shrimp on top of the hook. We're going to tie them right back to where the the mouth parts are. So that's those in place. The next stage is going to be tying in the eyes, but I want those eyes to be V-shaped. But if I tied them in now, they would just lie flat along the side of the hook, and you would then have to crimp your nylon or play around with it a lot to get them to sit in shape. So I'm going to do in a little egg sac on this, and it's basically this is an orange colored dubbing. Again, these are synthetic dubbing materials, and I've just put that on. That's a full box of different colors, so you could use green or orange or pink, whatever floats your boat really. But the typical color is that sort of orangey shade. So to put dubbing on, if you're experienced, you can get away without using any wax or tacky material. But if you're beginning, one of these tubes lasts years. I don't actually know why they sell them in such a big amount. But if you put a little bit of that on your finger, when you spin the dubbing on to the silk, it will stay in place, and the wax effectively calms the fibres down, and it washes out on your first trip if there was any like surplus. So what we're going to do with a small amount of dubbing, there's about 1.5 inches on there, we're going to make a ball. Now this ball is going to help display the eyes. Now what I'm showing here is for beginners that you need to miss the point of your hook. It's very, very hard to tie flies with the hook point buried in the vise. So as a beginner, I advise you to actually put the hook in the vise correctly and just learn to avoid it. After you've cut the silk about 50 times, you'll soon realize that you have to miss it. So anyway, this little ball is going to help us put our eyes in place. So the eyes on this fly I've made myself. They're made out of a little glass bead that has been glued onto the end of a burnt piece of nylon. Again, if you're not into doing your home hobbyist work, you can purchase these. So that's what I've made. I've 2 little glass seed eyes on a piece of monofilament, burnt the ends, and then coated them with UV resin. But this doesn't look clear to you perhaps, but I've actually mixed in some pearlescent loon powder into that, which gives the eyes that sort of opaque look. So that's one eye cut. You'll find that's that pearl material that I mixed in to give you that opalescent type appearance to the eye. When I've made the eye also, I clean off any tackiness that's left, put a little black mark with a marker on the end, and then coat them with some standard varnish. And that gives a pretty hard wearing eye. They won't last forever, but I like to make my own. So tying in mono, because it doesn't compress, you can pull the mono out of the tying. So I get a pair of standard electrician's pliers with serrated teeth, and I just come back about 5 millimeters from the eye and squeeze down hard, and that will give a serrated effect to the nylon. And that just means that when it's in place, you don't necessarily need glue to hold them. So I'm just crimping both of these. So a good firm squeeze, and you get these little teeth marks. I'll just apologize, I'm messing around here because I dropped one of the eyes, so I'm going to make a second set. So attempt number 2. So that's me preparing that nylon again with the pliers. If you don't have pliers, you can glue them in, and I probably do that on this fly just to show you that stage. You can do either or, but just tying them in on their own, they could very easily pull out. And I think as this shrimp is swimming away from its predator, the bonefish or whatever, those eyes are definitely a trigger point. Well, to anglers, they're a trigger point. The fish might actually disagree with me there. So I'm tying in both of those right down to the back of that little ball that we put in place, and that helps splay them out into position. And take the time to check that they're both the same length. If they're not the correct angle, you can bend them, but if they're different lengths, past this stage, you're fixed. Cutting off the waste, I use a pair of electrical snips. It just saves your good fly tying scissors, and that's them. I actually stopped the camera there for a second, but I just tied down the butts of the nylon. So now we're going to introduce a couple of rubber tentacles going out the back. These ones are silly legs or loco legs. If you're beginning to tie, I would recommend that you stock up initially with silicone rubber. The glitter that's in those doesn't seem to affect their strength as much, but I'm still using up quite a bit of stock of these other ones. They do last a long time, but I find that when you're tying, you can snap them. So I'm just pulling a loop below the hook, and then I'm going to split them either side of the hook, run them down each side of the body of the fly. So that means that one leg's facing me and one leg's facing you, and I'm going to then continue to tie them in place. You'll notice I tied them in just short of the bead chain eyes and then back. That means that they'll have time to position themselves equally. Now with rubber legs, you sort of want to do the last turns a little bit looser. So there's 2 or 3 loose wraps, and that means that the rubber leg won't spring out at 90 degrees to the hook shank, which wouldn't be a natural look for a shrimp trying to swim away. That tight turn can also cut your rubber leg. So a couple of loose turns at the very back of the tie-in point helps. So we're now ready to form the body of the fly. Now, I did say at the start this is a fly that's quite complicated. It's got a number of features in it, and I hope that this one you can follow with me. I'm going to make a dubbing loop. Don't be scared, it's easy enough. So I'm going to make a body up of 3 different materials. So we've got pink, a natural colour, and I'm also going to mix in a little bit of flash. So this next material I'm showing you is a Orvis baitfish wrap, and I'm going to take about 1 inch of that. That's how it would normally go in a baitfish pattern, but all I'm going to do is to take about 1 inch of it and cut the fibres off it, and then I'm going to mix that into my dubbing mix. So to get things underway, take about 50p piece of this is a natural seal's fur, but you can use any sort of light sandy see-through type material, and on top of that I've put in a little bit of pink. It's a very light pink, you would hardly even see it, about 20p size of that. And then this baitfish dub, I've set those on the table, and then I'm going to take off a little section of this and just cut the rope out of it. And again, that just gives that little bit of pearlescent look to the fly once we've finished. So that's the three materials not mixed, and I'm just going to take sections and set them on top of each other, and then after a few turns you get like a mix of the dubbing you want. If you're going to tie commercially, you'd be doing that in a big bucket and mix up enough for 50 or 60 flies, but I would typically mix up just what I'm going to tie that night. So here's the dubbing loop. So I've brought out about 8 inches of silk and then 8 inches back to the fly, and then I'm tying that off. So that's, again, don't be scared by dubbing loops. So I've got like an independent loop of thread, and then I'm taking the bobbin forward, and that's out of the way because I won't need the bobbin to make the body now because I've got this independent loop. Now to spin a loop you need a little tool. The dubbing spinner, there's a whole range of different ones available, but the one I'm using and like to use is just a simple 2-hook one, and those 2 hooks go into the loop, and that forms an elongated triangle. So you'll see if I pull on the triangle, the loop closes and opens, and that's an important thing to understand about this because it helps the material lock in place and not fall out while you're preparing it. So I hold that towards me, and with the triangle open I put in, if you can't do this with 2 hands, you need to just set out small sections of dubbing and then pick them up one by one. But we take about 5 pence piece diameter sections, put it in the V, pull the spinner towards you, that closes the loop, and then you can slide that section up to the fly. And you just keep repeating that process. And the only thing I can encourage you to do is to put in small amounts. It's better to have a longer dubbing loop, sparsely done, than a big clunky one. I suppose especially for these saltwater flies, because we're looking the fly to be translucent and semi-see-through. So again, I'm just introducing these little sections into the triangle and then pushing them up into place. Now I'm ready to do the spinning. So I'm holding the bottom of this and I'll try and get it in view. So that's the prepared brush in a way, and then I'm going to spin this dubbing spinner. So it's just like a little spin top in a way. So you'll see nothing's really happening, but that's because I'm holding the base of the loop, and when I let that go, you'll see that the dubbing loop spins quite aggressively. Now the rubber legs have a habit of getting in the way, so I'll just tuck that out of the road. So we've put the dubbing in quite sparse, and that means that I can keep twisting until I can no longer see the thread. Now some flies you might want to see the thread, but I'm spinning this until I've got like a core, so you'll see I can't really see any thread. And if you've got any places where there's a little bit too much, take it out now. Just pluck it out from the side to make it look as uneven a rope as possible. So we're now ready to take this round the body. The good thing about these dubbing ropes in a way is that because it's twisted flat nylon thread, it's quite durable, so you don't even need a rib, and well, bonefish don't have teeth anyway. So I'm now making almost touching turns going up the body, maybe 0.5 millimeter clearance or so between them, again because I don't want this fly overly dressed, and just proceeding up towards the base of the dumbbell eyes. And I'm now going to go between the dumbbell eyes to sort of hide the tying silk. I worry more about the top of the fly than the bottom, but again we're just hiding the loose ends. So I'm just tying forwards and then backwards onto the end of the dubbing loop, and then we can trim this out of the way, and that's the body formed. You'll notice I've got fibers going out towards the eye, and I will show you how to get rid of those. That's a common problem tying flies with dubbing, and it's also a very common problem with when you're starting to tie flies. But leave them there, don't panic, and I'll show you how to get rid of them. So now I'm tying in a wing, and again it's a very, very sparse wing. This is a Arctic fox, I believe, in tan, but a number of different hair materials would do very well. And this is just to give the simulation of a back to the shrimp. Now I'm doing a pinch and loop. Very, very hard for me to describe that on a video. You might want to just Google pinch and loop, or if you've got a fly tying book or whatever, there's loads of different descriptions of how to do that. And that's just a way to make sure that the wing, in a way, stays on top of the hook. So now I'm going to put in 2 more rubber legs, and again, you'll just notice I'm just hooking them underneath the eye and wrapping on top of those. And again, positioning them each side of the shank. Again, the last 2 or 3 wraps there, I'm doing loose wraps, to try and prevent cutting the rubber legs and making sure that they don't bounce out at 90 degrees. So the last material I'm putting in here is this is actually a crystal flash in root beer. Again, if you're just starting off, you don't need to worry too much about flashy colors. A pearl or clear one would do just as good. So again, I'm just introducing 2 strands on top of the wing, and I've got about 10 millimeters pointing out the front. Now I'm actually then going to brush those 10 millimeters back over, so that means they've got crystal flash going down into the head and back out of the head, so like they're never going anywhere. So I'm just showing you these little protrusions of fluff out the front, and if you stroke all your silk, rubber legs, crystal flash back out of the way, all you need is a standard lighter, and just give them a little burn. Don't go too much or you burn the thread, but a couple of little quick flashes will burn those out of the way. So this is the fly tied, effectively. I'm not going to cover the formation of a half hitch or a whip finish in this video, but suffice to say I'm going to show you one trick which will help your flies stay together whichever finishing knot you use, and that's that I'm putting a little bit of varnish on before I do the knot. One of my friends, David, showed me this a number of years back, and I've been sort of doing it ever since, especially for bigger flies. So now I'm forming my whip finish, and again there's loads of videos out there for doing a whip finish. I'm doing 2 whip finishes here. No need for the second one, especially that the varnish is underneath and in the knot, and that's the fly tied effectively. If you wanted to, you could put another coat on top of that to give it a glossy finish, but it's not really necessary. So now I'm holding the fly up vertical just to trim the rubber legs. Make sure you cut the right ones now. So I'm making the front 2 a little bit shorter than the back 2. If you're tying, I normally tie flies in sets of 6. You could actually leave the trimming of those legs to the end, so you've got all 6 flies sitting, and then they'll all be trimmed exactly the same. but that will only look better in your fly box, not really in the water. So that's the finished fly. I'm just going to do a little bit of work with what's called a dubbing brush. You can make one of these out of Velcro, out of an old rain jacket. But all I'm doing is just a basic combing exercise to tease out some of the body fibers. So that's the finished fly, but that particular one's done with bead chain. Again, guys, I hope you've enjoyed watching my video. Please like and subscribe, and if you've got any comments or feedback on my flies, I would appreciate it. I am trying to get more subscribers, so if you know any friends that would like to see some of my flies, please pass it on to them. Thank you very much. Good night.